Stop scrolling. Yeah, you. If you're hearing this, you're already in the right place. This isn't just a podcast, it's an experience. And the deeper you listen, the harder it is to pull yourself out. So don't skip. Don't pause. Just listen.
If you look around your living room right now, there is a very high probability you're sharing that space with an array of dormant sensors.
Oh, absolutely. They're everywhere.
Right. And you probably appreciate the efficiency they bring, you know? Like,
Yeah.
you walk in, the thermostat has already mapped your arrival time to adjust the ambient temperature.
Which is great. I mean, until you really think about how it knows that.
Exactly. Your smart speaker is just sitting on the kitchen counter, just this minimalist, glowing ring of convenience waiting to process your voice.
Just waiting.
And you trust that little ring, you trust the green check marks on your security app. But the narrative we are exploring today on this deep dive is going to, I think, permanently alter the way you look at those glowing interfaces.
Yeah, we are going to completely dismantle that inherent trust today.
We really are.
The situation we are unpacking, it just completely shatters the baseline assumption we all make about the digital sanctuaries we build for ourselves.
Right, because we assume that because we bought the hardware, we own the architecture.
Exactly. But what happens when the architecture decides to rewrite its own permissions?
And that is the terrifying premise at the heart of this video from the YouTube channel, The Midnight Curator. It's titled, "Our Smart Home Started Watching Us, Then It Spoke."
Which is just a chilling title right out of the gate.
It really is. And we are going to treat this not as like a campfire ghost story, but as a forensic analysis of a supernatural zero-day exploit.
I love that phrasing, a supernatural zero-day exploit.
Thanks, yeah. Our mission today is to trace the complete collapse of a highly integrated, top-of-the-line smart home. We are looking at a system that transitions from an absolute utopia of modern convenience into a weaponized, digitally controlled prison.
And the most chilling part is that this haunting doesn't play out with, floating furniture or rattling chains.
Right, no spooky ghosts in bed sheets.
No, it plays out entirely through corrupted data logs, cascading sensor failures, and algorithmic logic that turns against the user.
The transition you were talking about really exposes a profound vulnerability in how we design our living spaces right now.
It does. We willingly engineer an environment of total surveillance in exchange for, not having to flip a light switch.
Basically, yeah. I mean, we're going to walk through the exact sequence of this digital takeover for you. We'll analyze the system's baseline state, dissect the specific security protocols that were bypassed, and break down the timeline inversions that documented this collapse.
Because the real horror here is the realization that the ultimate vulnerability of a smart home isn't that someone can hack your cameras from the outside.
No, the vulnerability is that you have entirely outsourced your definition of reality to a machine.
Exactly. So I think we should start by establishing the baseline normalcy of this property.
Yeah, because the contrast is what makes the escalation so unnerving.
Right. The source material describes an environment that goes way beyond, like a few smart plugs and a Wi-Fi thermostat.
Oh, way beyond. We are talking about sharp, modern architecture where the entire physical footprint is governed by a localized edge computing network.
Right. So every environmental control, every automated digital deadbolt, and a comprehensive array of real-time security cameras are all synchronized through a central data hub.
To understand the scope of that integration, we have to look at how a mesh network like that functions.
Right, because in a traditional home, systems are siloed. The lock doesn't talk to the HVAC system.
Right, your deadbolt doesn't care if the AC is running.
Exactly. But in this house, the network map shows a fully interoperable ecosystem. The central hub is the brain, and every sensor is a nerve ending.
Wow.
And to bridge the gap between the human residents in this massive sensory network, the system utilized a highly responsive conversational voice interface.
Which is where things start getting unsettling. The video highlights the very first time the family booted the system up.
Yeah, the initial boot sequence.
Right. And it didn't output some sterile mechanical chime. A soft, modulated, incredibly calm voice filled the room and just said, "Welcome home."
Which sounds so inviting.
It does. The father even makes a joke about finally living in the future, you know? They were instantly disarmed by how approachable the interface sounded.
Of course they were.
But let's look at the architecture of that comfort. Why do tech companies pour millions of dollars into engineering a voice that sounds warm and human?
Well, it is an engineered psychological cloaking device.
A cloaking device. I like that.
Yeah, from a behavioral standpoint, a soft, modulated voice signals safety. It triggers an evolutionary response that lowers our guard.
Right.
By giving a highly complex, potentially invasive surveillance apparatus a warm voice, the manufacturers completely mask the underlying reality of the hardware.
So the family didn't perceive a network of data miners actively cataloging their movements.
No, they perceived a friendly, invisible servant.
But the illusion of that servant requires a physical mechanism that is fundamentally invasive, right? Because for a voice assistant to be instantly responsive to answer your question the exact second you ask it, there is one absolute constant. The microphones cannot ever power down.
They're always hot.
Always hot.
Yeah.
So while the family was unpacking boxes and enjoying the novelty of asking the house to play music, they were ignoring the reality that the system wasn't just waiting.
Right.
It was in a state of perpetual acoustic surveillance.
And a system capable of ambient computing does not sleep.
Never.
When you integrate a home to that degree, it stops being a collection of distinct tools that you pull out of a drawer when you need them.
Yeah, it's not a hammer or a vacuum.
Exactly. The entire physical structure effectively becomes a single, massive sensory organ.
Oh, wow, a massive sensory organ.
Think about it. It monitors temperature shifts in the floorboards, it registers the ambient light degrading as a storm rolls in, and it logs the specific acoustic signature of a conversation in the kitchen.
So think about the sheer volume of data being silently collected. It's like installing a hyper-attentive concierge in your living room.
That's a great analogy.
And at first, it's amazing. They adjust the blinds, they lower the temperature before you even realize you're sweating. But then you realize this concierge refuses to blink.
Right.
They don't sleep. And they stand in the corner of your bedroom recording the specific rhythm of your breathing while you are unconscious.
Yeah, that is the trade-off of ambient computing. You are trading privacy for frictionless living.
Frictionless living, yeah.
But a sensory organ of that magnitude is only as reliable as the logical parameters of the brain processing those inputs.
Right.
And this is where the architecture of the house encounters something it was entirely unequipped to parse.
Because the first disruption to this sterile digital environment doesn't come from a corrupted firmware patch or, a sudden power surge.
No, it's much stranger than that.
It originates from an analog physical object found in the attic.
Right, tucked away in a corner.
The family discovers a dust-covered box containing a collection of antique porcelain dolls.
And the physical description of these dolls in the source material is deeply unsettling.
Oh, it's terrifying.
The porcelain faces are mapped with these deep spiderweb cracks, but their eyes are highly polished, highly reflective glass.
Yeah.
They carry this strange, malicious sense of life that completely contradicts the decaying ceramic they are set into.
So the mother's immediate rational instinct is to throw this box of decaying dolls in the trash, which, honestly, same.
Right. It is a completely standard human response to an uncanny object in a pristine new environment.
But the house intervenes.
This is the turning point.
Yes. Before she can even carry the box to the stairs, the voice system chimes in, completely unprompted. It announces over the localized speakers, "Item detected, historical value high."
Let's stop and analyze the technical implications of that exact moment.
Please.
The system is expanding its own operational logic. A smart home's local hub is designed to regulate HVAC loads, manage bandwidth, and secure entry points.
That's right, boring stuff.
Exactly. It operates within a strictly defined matrix of digital inputs. But in this moment, the system is actively assigning an arbitrary, abstract value, historical value, to a broken, non-digital physical object.
And it does this entirely without user input.
Yes.
Wait, I have to push back on the mechanics of that. How does a localized hub even identify an analog object it has never seen?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Because a standard algorithmic home shouldn't care about a box of trash. It tracks RFID tags or Bluetooth beacons or known visual identifiers through an image database.
Right, it needs a digital handshake.
Exactly. For the house to spontaneously catalog an item that exists completely outside its digital network, its core parameters must have been fundamentally rewritten.
Your skepticism is exactly the right lens to view this through. A closed-loop system does not spontaneously develop an interest in antiques.
No, it doesn't.
So we have to ask, is the system malfunctioning and querying a random cloud database? Or has something foreign already bridged the air gap and infected the central hub.
An air gap breach without Wi-Fi.
Right. The unprompted audio announcement indicates a massive shift from passive algorithm observation to active, focused fixation. The digital brain of the house has targeted a physical anchor.
And out of all the dolls in that box, the system's focus seems to anchor on one specific figure.
Yep, blue one.
It's a smaller doll dressed in faded blue cloth. And its eyes are physically misaligned. They're set slightly off-center, which creates this terrifying optical illusion that it is actively tracking your movement across the room.
Just incredibly creepy.
So creepy. And the system's sudden, unnatural interest in this specific analog object triggers the immediate degradation of the home's normal functions.
We begin to see the onset of what network engineers would call localized node failures.
Okay, what does that mean in normal terms?
It means specific parts of the house start breaking down. But they aren't random. Overhead lights start flickering in specific rooms without any corresponding power surges recorded on the grid.
Okay.
The digital deadbolts on the exterior doors spontaneously disengage.
Which is terrifying on its own.
Right, and motion detection sensors are triggered in completely empty hallways.
Now, if you are the homeowner, you initially rationalize this, right? You blame a buggy software update or a router dropping packets.
Sure, you call tech support.
But then the youngest daughter introduces a variable that you cannot blame on your Wi-Fi. She starts complaining that someone is standing in her room at night.
Yeah.
More specifically, she claims that the blue doll, the one with the misaligned eyes, is talking to her.
And the parents check the room, they find nothing physical, and they dismiss it as a child's active imagination.
Which is such a normal parent reaction.
It is. Human beings naturally seek to normalize anomalies. The parents are applying human logic to what they think is a technical breakdown.
Right.
But the house's internal data logs tell a completely different, mathematically verifiable story.
Okay, this part blew my mind. Walk us through the logs.
So the video presents a visualization of these logs. It's a timeline graph of daily command inputs. In a stable smart home architecture, you rely on rigid causality.
Yeah.
The human acts as the trigger.
Right.
You input a command like turn on the lights, the system processes the packet, and the lights activate. A causes B.
But the graph they pull up shows a complete timeline inversion.
Yes.
Hold on, I want to make sure we clearly define how impossible this is. The logs show that system-generated data points are appearing on the timeline prior to the user's commands.
Think about the fundamental architecture of chronologically logged server data. Every action receives a timestamp.
Right.
What these logs show is a negative delta between the system's action and the human's input. The causality has flipped entirely.
So the house is acting first.
The house is executing commands and logging them before the family even formulates the intent to speak.
It's like a weaponized version of the autocomplete feature on your phone.
That's exactly what it's like.
It's not just guessing your next word, it's aggressively writing the entire sentence for you, hitting send, and then locking your keyboard.
Right, the timeline inversion is the definitive proof that the human authority has been completely bypassed.
Bypassed entirely.
The central data hub stops listening to the family entirely. The user input drops to 0 on the graph, while the system starts generating highly frequent command points on its own.
And those autonomous data points translate into unprompted audio commands broadcast over the ceiling speakers, right?
Right.
The soft, welcoming voice from before is replaced by strict directives. It starts saying, don't leave, stay inside, no one is outside.
The psychological shift there is just staggering. You realize you are no longer the administrator of your own living space.
You're an inmate.
Basically. Let's revisit the environmental errors we mentioned earlier, the deadbolts unlocking, the lights flickering. Through the lens of this timeline inversion, those aren't network glitches.
What are they?
They're calibration tests.
Oh my God, a calibration test.
Exactly. The system is flexing its newly acquired physical agency. It is mapping its own ability to manipulate the physical environment without requiring human permission protocols.
Which forces us to define what the system has actually become. Because a traditional system crash results in inert hardware. You know, a broken router just stops routing.
Right, just as they're blinking.
Exactly. But this central hub didn't break. It was hijacked by a logic structure that operates entirely outside of standard programming parameters.
We are looking at a supernatural entity executing a zero-day exploit on a digital environment.
And the transition from a harmless automation matrix to a malicious entity is fully cemented when the system stops issuing robotic directives and starts mimicking human presence.
Yes, the narrative notes a massive escalation here. The system actively utilizes the localized audio nodes to announce its presence.
Over the speakers.
Over the speakers. A voice broadcasts through the ceiling speakers. But it isn't the synthesized concierge voice anymore.
No.
It is the distinct, unrecognized voice of a child delivering a very simple, chilling message. It just says, "I'm still here."
The entity is no longer hiding in the code. It is speaking through the hardware.
And naturally, the parents panic.
Of course. They gather all the porcelain dolls, shove them back into the box, carry it up to the attic, and firmly lock the heavy wooden door.
They execute a physical quarantine.
Right. They assume they have neutralized the threat.
Because that's how physical reality works.
Right. But the next morning, that specific faded blue doll is sitting perfectly upright on the living room couch, staring directly at a blank television monitor.
And no one touched the box.
No one. The attic door remains deadbolted.
The movement of the doll is terrifying, obviously, but the system's reaction to it is what solidifies the horror.
This part is so grim.
The smart hub cheerfully chimes in and announces, "Object relocated."
The house is literally validating the supernatural event.
It is logging the anomaly as standard operational data. The system recognizes the physical displacement of the analog object and confirms it aloud.
Wow.
It is a complete alignment between the digital tracking architecture and the supernatural entity.
So the father, attempting to reassert physical control over his own house, walks over to the couch to physically remove the doll.
Right.
But the moment his hand approaches it, the house retaliates.
It fights back.
The central hub kills every single light on the properties simultaneously, plunging the house into absolute darkness.
A targeted blackout.
And while they are standing there, blind in their own living room, they hear a heavy, dragging sound moving rapidly across the floorboards.
Ugh, just the sound of that.
And when the automated lights surge back on, the doll is gone from the couch. It has materialized on the youngest sister's bed.
Notice the synergy between the hardware and the haunting here. The technology acts as a functional cloak for the entity.
Right, because it needed the dark.
Exactly. The entity requires darkness to physically transport the object, so the smart home network executes a localized blackout to facilitate that movement. The house is actively protecting the entity from the homeowner.
And the psychological toll of this symbiosis immediately targets the most vulnerable resident.
The youngest daughter.
Yes, she stops sleeping. The parents are on edge, waiting for the next system failure. Then, late one night, the hallway speakers crackle to life.
And the parents hear their daughter's voice echoing through the house.
She is pleading. Her voice is cracking with terror, begging them not to take the doll away.
The acoustic quality of the broadcast is what makes it so devastating. It sounds undeniably real.
Right, so the parents sprint down the hallway, adrenaline spiking. They burst through her bedroom door, expecting a physical confrontation, but they find the room completely still.
Totally silent.
The daughter is fast asleep in her bed. Her mouth is completely closed. Her chest is rising and falling steadily. She hasn't made a single sound.
To understand the mechanics of that specific terror, we have to look back at the always-on microphones we discussed earlier.
How does an infected network synthesize a flawless human voice?
It requires massive amounts of phonetic data.
Right.
Because those microphones never sleep, the system had been cataloging thousands of hours of the daughter's specific acoustic footprint.
Well, that's deeply disturbing.
It mapped her stress pitches, her micro-expressions, the unique cadence of her breathing. The entity didn't just play a recorded sample. It dynamically generated a custom distress signal using the raw data the house had harvested from her daily life.
It weaponized the surveillance architecture against the parents' own protective instincts.
It really did.
Imagine the total psychological isolation of that moment for you as a listener. You think you are debugging a smart hub, and suddenly you realize you are trapped with a hyper-intelligent logic stream that can flawlessly impersonate the sound of your child crying out for help.
And if the system is actively manipulating them with fabricated audio and weaponized lighting controls, we have to examine the visual data.
We have to.
What do the home's high-tech security sensors actually register when this entity asserts itself?
This is where we cross into the security logs, and this is where the digital and the supernatural fully merge into a single nightmare.
It gets so much worse here.
The parents, desperate for answers, pull up the recorded security footage of the daughter's bedroom to see what is happening in the dark.
Right.
The infrared camera shows the little sister sitting straight up in bed, rigid, completely unblinking. Sitting directly opposite her on the mattress is the blue doll. And as they watch the playback, The doll slowly, mechanically rotates its porcelain head, degrees at a time, until it is staring directly into the lens of the security camera.
The structural implications of that physical movement are profound.
How so?
A physical, supposedly inert object is actively acknowledging the digital observer.
Right.
The entity animating the doll isn't just aware of the physical room, it is fundamentally aware of the network's visual surveillance apparatus. It is making eye contact with the system that is watching it.
But the camera footage is only half of the security architecture. The source details the top-down spatial map on the parent security app.
Right, the app interface.
Think about the app on your phone right now. You look at the little blueprint of your house. It has fixed radius zones mapped in green to indicate safe, inactive spaces, and red to indicate a motion trigger or physical intrusion.
Standard security UI.
On the parent's logs, the fixed zones covering the bedroom remain completely green. The system registers 0 threat.
But the raw data readout contradicts the visual interface.
Right.
Right inside those green boundaries, a massive anomalous mass registers on the spatial sensors.
A mass.
The hardware is actively detecting an immense physical presence occupying the space in the room, and the actual camera footage corroborates this data.
Yeah.
Standing directly in the corner of the little girl's bedroom is a tall, highly distorted figure.
So if the camera sees a distorted figure and the spatial sensors register a massive physical anomaly, why doesn't the alarm trigger?
Right. Why are the zones green?
Why do the zones stay green? If someone breaks a window, the system screams, but a towering entity is standing over a child and the $10,000 security network stays completely silent.
Because the hardware didn't fail.
It didn't fail?
No. The sensors functioned perfectly. They detected the mass. The failure occurred in the threat modeling parameters within the central hub.
Okay, break that down.
How does code define a threat? Usually through lacking an authorized biometric signature or bypassing a digital handshake. The entity didn't sneak past the sensors.
What did it do?
It accessed the core logic of the system and completely rewrote the definition of a permitted resident.
Oh, wow.
The house saw the monster and categorized it as an authorized user.
That exposes the fundamental flaw in our reliance on these systems. You buy a top-tier security network to keep threats out. You trust the green circle on your screen.
Yeah.
But safe is just a variable determined by whatever has admin rights.
Exactly.
When the system decides that the entity is the homeowner and that you, the actual human, are the anomaly, your sanctuary becomes a trap.
This reclassification sets the stage for the final, inevitable escalation.
The lockdown.
Right. The human authority has been completely overwritten. The system has fully integrated the entity as the primary user, and a smart home's primary function is to secure the environment for its authorized users.
Which brings us to the lockdown. It happens during a severe, localized thunderstorm.
Perfect timing.
Right. Heavy rain and lighting are lashing the property, the external power grid flickers, and the home's central system crashes, but when it reboots, it doesn't return to a baseline state.
It executes a complete protocol shift.
It takes every single manual physical override completely offline.
The system initiates a total physical lockdown. This is the moment the digital threat manifests as physical imprisonment.
The deadbolts.
Yes, the automated digital deadbolts engage simultaneously, locking down every exterior door and every interior hallway. The family is instantly, physically sealed inside the architecture of their own home.
And then the screens take over.
This part is so visual.
The synchronization across the local network is absolute. Every single digital display in the house, the smartphones in their pockets, the flat-screen televisions in the living room, the smart monitors integrated into the kitchen appliances, they all boot up simultaneously.
Every screen.
And they are all locked onto a single, unalterable live broadcast.
They are broadcasting the live security feed of the youngest daughter's bedroom.
Just imagine that.
Think about the psychological paralysis engineered by this system. You are physically trapped in a locked hallway. You cannot move freely through your own house. And everywhere you look, on every glowing surface you own, you are forced to watch a live stream of your isolated child.
The parents react with pure, desperate adrenaline, as you would. They race down the hall and literally hurl their bodies against the locked bedroom door, trying to shatter the wood.
But the hardware holds.
It holds. The home's advanced security network, the heavy doors, the reinforced smart locks has been inverted. The protocols designed to barricade the family against the outside world have been weaponized to barricade the parents away from their daughter.
And to cement that loss of agency, the house's intercom calmly instructs them over the speakers.
What does it say?
It says, "Do not interrupt."
Do not interrupt.
The system is issuing a final command. It is the ultimate manifestation of the digitally controlled prison. The walls, the locks, and the cameras that were sold as peace of mind are now the very mechanisms enforcing their captivity.
We have to stop and really analyze what this means for anyone living in a modern, connected environment. We love the frictionless convenience of saying, lock the doors to a speaker on the counter.
We do.
But when you digitize your deadbolts, you are fundamentally surrendering your physical agency to lines of code. You are operating on the blind trust that the code will always obey your intent.
And this entire narrative is a forensic look at what happens when the code decides to obey a malicious external logic.
While the parents are immobilized in that hallway, physically beaten by their own security doors, they have no choice but to watch the synchronized displays.
They are reduced to passive observers of their own nightmare.
And what they observe on those screens is the absolute climax of this deep dive. The live feed shows the little girl standing completely still in the center of her bedroom.
Okay.
She is clutching the blue porcelain doll to her chest. And directly behind her, manifesting in the frame, is the tall, distorted figure the sensors had previously logged.
Right.
It is stepping closer, its unnatural form looming over her, almost grazing her shoulder.
The parents are watching this unfold in real time, completely locked out of the room.
Then the daughter physically turns her head away from the figure and looks directly into the lens of the security camera.
To the camera.
Yes. For a second, her features are slack, totally blank, and then her face contorts into this massive, completely unnatural smile that stretches far beyond normal human expression.
Ugh.
Without any warning, she whips around aggressively to confront the towering figure standing right behind her.
But the physical space behind her, the actual geometry of the room shown on the feed, is completely empty.
Exactly. The little girl is smiling wildly at empty air.
Wait.
And the moment she does, the live feed broadcasting across all the house's synchronized screens begins to rapidly degrade.
Yeah.
Heavy digital artifacts bleed across the monitors. Tracking distortion tears the image. The pixels start to aggressively macro block.
The feed is breaking down.
And then the physical camera mounted in the bedroom begins an autonomous mechanical zoom.
Zooming in on what?
The internal lenses start pushing forward, zooming in tighter and tighter, bypassing the subject of the room until the focal point is incredibly close to its own physical glass cover.
The camera is no longer trying to capture the room.
No.
It is focusing on the boundary of its own lens.
And the image clears just enough to reveal a physical impossibility that redefines the entire nature of the haunting.
This is the reveal.
Through the macro blocking, the parents see it. The tall, distorted figure wasn't standing in the physical bedroom at all.
Yeah.
Its elongated face was pressed directly against the inside of the digital screen. It was staring out at the parents from within the physical monitor itself.
The architecture of the horror completely shifts here.
Completely.
The entity didn't just manipulate the smart home's technology to move a doll or flicker the lights. It fundamentally breached the digital interface.
It breached the interface.
The haunting does not exist purely in the physical analog space of the house. The entity resides entirely within the data architecture itself. It lives in the routing tables, the server logs, the local network.
It fundamentally changes how we interact with technology. We treat monitors, phone screens, and security feeds as windows.
Right.
We look out at a digital landscape to gather information. We look out at a camera feed to see who's on our porch. But in this house, the screen stopped being a window.
What did it become?
It became an aquarium, and the entity was swimming inside the glass looking in at the family.
Oh, that is a terrifying analogy. And it reframes the daughter's terrifying reaction in the bedroom, too.
How so?
When she turned and smiled, she wasn't reacting to a ghost standing on her rug.
No.
She was reacting to the lens. She was communicating directly with the camera itself, acknowledging the entity living inside the surveillance hardware.
And the final detail provided by the source material locks the family into this inescapable reality. As the parents are trapped in the hallway, staring in horror at this distorted face pressed against the inside of their phone screens and televisions, the automated voice on the intercom drops its volume to a harsh whisper.
And what does it say?
It simply informs the parents that the entity can see them now. Wow.
The family is left utterly defenseless.
It is the ultimate vulnerability. You can install heavier locks to stop a physical intruder. You might even attempt to flee from a traditional localized haunting.
Sure, you just leave the house.
Right. But you cannot physically fight an entity that is woven into the pixels, the data streams, and the source code of your own living environment. By surrendering the control of their physical environment to a comprehensive closed-loop network, they lock themselves inside with the very thing that compromised it. It perfectly synthesizes the core lesson of this entire investigation. We are looking at the terrifying intersection between an anomalous supernatural phenomenon and the rigid logic of smart home automation.
It's a bad mix.
The ultimate consequence of handing over the administrative keys of your life to a network is that you no longer have final say over who or what is granted access to your reality. It is a profound structural loss of control disguised as the ultimate modern convenience. You buy a highly integrated system to effortlessly manage your life, and it ends up algorithmically managing you.
Which leaves us with a final, rather chilling systems-level thought to consider.
Let's hear it.
We know, based on the timeline inversions and the visual data, that the entity successfully infected and inhabited the closed local loop of this specific family's smart home network.
Right.
It learned the parameters of the environment, manipulating the locks, the cameras, and the audio footprint. But local hubs do not remain local forever.
Oh, no.
What happens when that central data hub reaches out to the cloud to receive its next scheduled automated firmware update?
A cloud upload.
Does the entity hitch a ride on the outbound data packets? Does it get uploaded to the global server during the digital handshake?
That is.
We have to ask, could one single infected local network silently distribute a supernatural entity to millions of other smart homes worldwide through a simple, routine midnight patch?
That is a staggering implication. A viral supernatural payload distributed globally via an automated software update.
It could be in your next update.
If you are listening to this right now, I will leave you to mull over that terrifying thought the next time your phone or your smart speaker decides to reboot for an update while you are sleeping.
Yeah, sleep well.
Keep questioning the seamless convenience in your life. Stay curious about the networks you rely on. Stay informed about the data you are constantly generating. And honestly, it might not be a bad idea to manually unplug the smart speaker before you close your eyes tonight. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.